I'm Nicole, 28 years old, and I just caught my parents planning something that would destroy my life. Standing frozen outside their study door, I watched through the crack as they whispered about the insurance policy and finally being free of her, while shuffling documents across their mahogany desk. My blood ran cold when I saw my signature perfectly forged on legal papers I'd never seen before. Then my mother's eyes met mine through that narrow opening, and her smile sent chills down my spine. Before we dive into this shocking story, let me ask, where are you watching from today? If you've ever felt betrayed by someone you trusted, hit that like button and subscribe to hear how I survived the ultimate family betrayal. Trust me, what happens next will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about family loyalty. Let's continue with how this nightmare began. Looking back, I should have seen the signs earlier. I'd always been the perfect daughter to Harold and Ruth Stevens, maintaining straight A's through school, graduating summa cum laude from Northwestern, and landing a prestigious position as a marketing executive at a Fortune 500 company in Chicago. My parents had always been loving, perhaps overly so, calling me 3 times a day, showing up at my apartment unannounced with homemade casseroles, and insisting on managing my finances because that's what loving parents do for their only child. The changes started subtly after my breakup with Marcus 6 months ago. My parents, who had never liked him, seemed almost gleeful when I told them we'd ended our 3-year relationship. "Come home for a while, sweetheart," my mother had cooed over the phone. "You need your family during this difficult time." When I politely declined explaining that I was fine in my Lincoln Park apartment, their behavior shifted. The calls increased to 5 or 6 times daily. My father started showing up at my office, telling my colleagues he was worried about Nicole's state of mind after her devastating breakup. Then came the strange incidents. I'd catch them whispering on the phone, hanging up abruptly when I entered the room. Papers would disappear into locked drawers whenever I visited their Winnetka mansion. They started meeting with lawyers claiming it was about estate planning, but refused to include me in any discussions. "Don't worry your pretty little head about such boring matters," my father would say, patting my shoulder condescendingly. My suspicions deepened when I was helping them with their monthly bills, something I'd done since college to ease their technological struggles. I noticed several unusual transactions in their accounts. Large transfers to names I didn't recognize, legal fees that seemed excessive for simple estate planning, and most disturbing of all, credit inquiries that didn't make sense for a retired couple. When I questioned them, my mother laughed it off. "Oh, Nicole, you're imagining things. Maybe this breakup has affected you more than you realize." The first real betrayal came crashing down on me during a routine check of my credit report. I'd been planning to buy a condo and wanted to ensure everything was in order. What I found made my stomach drop. 3 credit cards I'd never opened maxed out with $40,000 in debt. A personal loan for $25,000 with my signature dated just 2 weeks ago when I'd been in Denver for a work conference. The applications all listed my parents' address, and the spending patterns matched their habits: luxury cruises, high-end shopping, expensive dinners at their country club. My hands shook as I called Emma Rodriguez, my best friend since freshman year at Northwestern, and now a forensic accountant at a major firm. I need your help. Something's seriously wrong." Within hours, she was at my apartment, her laptop open, her expression growing more concerned with each document she reviewed. "Nicole, this is systematic fraud. These applications were submitted from IP addresses registered to your parents' home. The signatures are forgeries, good ones, but forgeries nonetheless. You need to document everything and consider filing a police report." The thought of reporting my own parents made me physically ill. These were the people who'd raised me, who'd attended every school play, who'd cried at my college graduation. There has to be an explanation. I insisted even as Emma showed me transaction after transaction that pointed to deliberate deception. Maybe someone stole their information and mine. Maybe they're victims too. Emma's dark eyes filled with sympathy. Nicole, I know this is hard, but look at the patterns. The spending started small and escalated. The credit cards were opened one at a time over 6 months. This isn't the work of a random identity thief. Someone with intimate knowledge of your personal information did this. Someone who knew your social security number, your previous addresses, your mother's maiden name. The next day, I confronted them as gently as possible, giving them every opportunity to explain. I sat across from them in their pristine living room, the same room where I'd opened Christmas presents and blown out birthday candles and showed them the credit reports. My mother's face went pale, then red. My father's jaw tightened. "How dare you accuse us of stealing from you?" he thundered. "After everything we've done for you, this is how you repay us by treating us like common criminals." My mother began to cry, her shoulders shaking. "I told you she was becoming paranoid, Harold. First she pushes away that nice Marcus, now she's turning on us. Maybe we should talk to someone about getting her help." The way she said help made my skin crawl. It was calculating, rehearsed, like she'd been practicing this scene. That evening, they called me repeatedly, leaving voicemails that alternated between concern and guilt trips. "Nicole, sweetheart, we're worried about you. Your mother hasn't stopped crying since you left. Please come to dinner tomorrow. We have some family documents we need you to sign. Just routine things for the trust." Trust. The word echoed in my mind as I lay awake that night. What kind of trust requires signatures on documents they won't let me read? What kind of parents respond to questions about fraud with accusations of mental instability? And why did my mother's tears seem so perfectly timed, so theatrical? As dawn broke through my bedroom windows, I made a decision. If my parents were setting a trap, I needed to understand it before I walked in. Emma was right. I needed to document everything, but more importantly, I needed to find out what they were really planning. The perfect daughter facade was cracking, and underneath something sinister was emerging. The rabbit hole went deeper than I could have imagined. Emma and I spent the next 2 weeks conducting our own investigation, and what we uncovered shattered the last remnants of my trust in my parents. It started with a simple question. Why would financially comfortable parents steal from their daughter? The answer came from an unlikely source. A dusty box of documents in my apartment that I'd been meaning to sort through since my grandmother Rose passed away 3 years ago. Grandma Rose had always been the rebel in our conservative family. A woman who'd built her own real estate empire in the 60s when women weren't supposed to understand property investment. She'd been close to me, but had a strained relationship with my mother, her daughter-in-law. "That woman never loved your father," she'd tell me during our lunch dates. She loved what he represented: security status and access to money she'd never earned. In that box, buried beneath sympathy cards and funeral programs, I found a letter from a law firm dated just 1 month before Grandma Rose's death. The letterhead bore the name of an estate attorney in Milwaukee, someone I'd never heard of. The content made my heart race. My grandmother had been in the process of revising her will, leaving the bulk of her $5 million estate directly to me, bypassing my parents entirely. The letter referenced a meeting scheduled for the week after she died, a meeting that obviously never happened. I drove to Milwaukee the next day, my hands gripping the steering wheel as my mind raced. The attorney, William Nash, remembered my grandmother well. Lovely woman, sharp as a tack. She was very clear about her intentions. She wanted to ensure you were protected and independent. She had concerns about your parents' financial habits and their influence over you. He paused, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses. I was surprised when I was told she'd decided not to proceed with the changes. The call came from your father saying she'd changed her mind and wanted to keep the original will in place. The original will, I learned, left everything to my father with the expectation that he would provide for Nicole as he sees fit. In other words, my parents controlled millions that should have been mine, and they'd actively prevented me from learning about it. The forced credit cards and loans suddenly made sense. They were already spending my inheritance, but they needed more, and they needed a way to ensure I never challenged their control. The second major attack came 3 days later. I'd been careful varying my routines, but somehow they knew I'd been investigating. I came home to find my apartment in subtle disarray. Nothing obviously disturbed, but items slightly out of place. My medication bottles rearranged in the bathroom cabinet. My coffee maker moved inches from its usual spot. My laptop warm, despite being closed all day. I called building security, but they insisted no one had entered. That's when I noticed the new set of keys on my parents' kitchen counter during an obligatory Sunday dinner keys that looked remarkably like mine. The paranoia they'd accused me of became justified vigilance. I installed hidden cameras, changed my locks, and started documenting everything obsessively. The cameras caught something terrifying 2 nights later, a figure letting themselves into my apartment at 3 in the morning. The person wore dark clothing and kept their face hidden, but I recognized the watch, a vintage Rolex I'd given my father for his 60th birthday. He went straight to my kitchen, did something near my coffee maker and cereal boxes, then left within 10 minutes. I had the food tested by a private lab Emma recommended. The results showed traces of benzodiazepines medications that cause confusion, memory loss, and in the right doses behavior that could easily be characterized as mental instability. My parents weren't just stealing from me. They were actively trying to drive me crazy, or at least make me appear so. The third attack was more brazen. My parents filed a report with the Winnetka Police Department expressing grave concerns about my mental health. They claimed I'd been making wild accusations showing signs of paranoia and had threatened them during our last meeting. The officer who called me was sympathetic but duty-bound to follow up. Your parents seem genuinely worried, Miss Stevens. They mentioned you've been under a lot of stress lately. Have you considered talking to someone? My cousin Derek called that evening, his voice full of concern. Derek had always been like a brother to me, the only extended family member I truly trusted. Nicole, I heard what's been going on. Your parents are really worried. Maybe I can help mediate. I hate seeing the family torn apart like this. I was so desperate for an ally within the family that I confided in him, sharing some of my suspicions and evidence. He listened carefully occasionally, gasping at the right moments, promising to help me get to the bottom of things. The full scope of their plan became clear when Emma hacked into an email account my parents had created in my name. The inbox was full of correspondence with mental health facilities, inquiries about long-term care options, and most chilling draft conservatorship papers. They were planning to have me declared mentally incompetent, giving them complete control over my finances, my health decisions, and ultimately my life. The emails went back 8 months before my breakup with Marcus, before any of their concerned behavior. This had been planned meticulously, with my ex-boyfriend's departure simply providing a convenient trigger for their plan. I sat in Emma's apartment surrounded by printed evidence, feeling the walls closing in. Every interaction with my parents over the past year took on new meaning. Every concerned glance, every suggestion that I seemed tired or stressed, every gentle recommendation that I should take time off work. They'd been planting seeds, creating a narrative that their once successful daughter was falling apart. What do I do? I asked Emma, my voice barely above a whisper. They're my parents. How do I fight my own parents? Emma squeezed my hand, her expression fierce. You fight smart. They think they've already won, that you're too trusting, too damaged by their manipulation to see clearly. But Nicole, you're not the victim in their story anymore. You're going to be the author of your own ending. She pulled out a business card. Miranda Chen is the best family law attorney in the state. She specializes in financial abuse cases. It's time to stop documenting and start fighting back. As I took the card, I made a decision that would have seemed impossible just weeks before. If my parents wanted to play a game of deception and betrayal, I'd show them that their perfect daughter had learned from the best. The trap they'd so carefully constructed was about to become their own prison. But first, I had to let them think they were winning. The fourth attack came at me through my career, the one area of my life I thought was safely insulated from my parents' reach. I was in the middle of presenting a major campaign proposal to our biggest client when my boss, Stan Morrison, interrupted with an apologetic expression. Nicole, I'm sorry, but we need to postpone. Can you come to my office? The walk down the hallway felt like a death march, my heels clicking against marble floors as my mind raced through possible explanations. Stan closed the door behind us and gestured to the chairs in front of his desk, choosing to sit beside me rather than behind his imposing desk. That's when I knew something was seriously wrong. Nicole, I received a concerning call from your parents yesterday. They're worried about you, said you've been exhibiting erratic behavior, making paranoid accusations. They mentioned you might be having a breakdown related to your recent relationship ending. My blood boiled, but I forced myself to remain calm, professional. Stan, I'm fine. My parents and I are having some family disagreements, but it has nothing to do with my work performance. Have you seen any issues with my productivity or behavior? He shook his head slowly. No, your work has been exemplary as always. But they were quite convincing, Nicole. They said you've been accusing them of elaborate conspiracies, that you've become paranoid and delusional. Your father even suggested you might benefit from a leave of absence to get treatment. The room spun slightly as I realized how deep their tentacles reached. They weren't content with just personal destruction. They wanted to dismantle my professional life too. Stan, I need you to trust me. My parents are trying to gain control of my inheritance from my grandmother. What you're witnessing is their attempt to discredit me. I have documentation if you need to see it. Stan studied me carefully. 40 years of business experience, evident in his measured gaze. I've known you for 5 years, Nicole. You've never given me reason to doubt your judgment. But I need you to understand, if this escalates, if they continue contacting the office or our clients, I'll have to take action to protect the company. I left his office with my job intact, but hanging by a thread. Emma was waiting in my apartment when I arrived home, her laptop open, her expression grim. It gets worse. Your ex-boyfriend Jake has been in contact with your parents. They've been meeting regularly for the past month. Jake, whom I'd dated for 6 months after Marcus, who'd seemed so understanding about my trust issues, who'd held me while I cried about my family situation. The betrayal cut deep. Emma pulled up social media posts, tagged locations showing Jake with my parents at their country club, at expensive restaurants, always careful to avoid posting actual photos together. I did some digging. Your parents are paying him, Nicole. $10,000 so far, with promises of more. He's been providing them with recordings of your conversations, particularly the ones where you talked about feeling overwhelmed and stressed. I sank into my couch, remembering all those intimate conversations where I'd opened up about my fears, my doubts, the pressure I felt. Jake had seemed so supportive, always encouraging me to share more, to let it all out. Now I understood why he'd been so interested in my mental state, why he'd pushed for details about my family conflicts. Every vulnerability I'd shared had been weaponized against me. The fifth attack came swift and brutal. I received an alert from my bank that my savings account containing $60,000 I'd carefully saved over 7 years had been emptied. The transaction was authorized using a power of attorney document I'd never signed, but which bore a signature identical to mine. When I called the bank, frantic and desperate, they were apologetic, but firm. The documentation appeared legitimate, the signature matched their records, and the POA had been notarized. My parents had also thoughtfully provided the bank with documentation about my mental health issues, suggesting they were stepping in to protect my assets during my difficult time. That night, I met with Miranda Chen in her downtown office. She was everything Emma had promised, sharp, experienced, and absolutely ruthless when it came to protecting her clients. After reviewing my evidence for 2 hours, she leaned back in her leather chair, her expression thoughtful. "Your parents have been clever, but they've also been sloppy. Financial abuse leaves trails, and forged documents can be detected. The drugging especially works in our favor. That's attempted poisoning, a criminal offense." She outlined a strategy that was both brilliant and terrifying. "We're going to let them think they've won. You're going to play the part of the deteriorating daughter just enough to make them overconfident. Meanwhile, we'll be building a case that will not only protect you, but put them in prison where they belong. Are you prepared for that possibility? Sending your own parents to jail." I thought about the systematic destruction they'd planned for me, the calculated cruelty of their actions. They stopped being my parents the moment they decided I was nothing more than a bank account to plunder. "I'm prepared for whatever it takes." Miranda smiled, a predator recognizing another predator. "Good. Then let's discuss your performance. You're going to have a very public breakdown, just minor enough to concern people, but not enough to actually get hospitalized. We want your parents to think their plan is working perfectly." The next week, I gave an Oscar-worthy performance. I showed up to work slightly disheveled, seemed distracted in meetings, and had a tearful breakdown in the office bathroom where I knew the office gossip would overhear. I called my parents repeatedly, leaving rambling voicemails about feeling confused and scared. I even showed up at their house at 2 a.m, claiming I couldn't sleep and needed my mother. My mother's eyes gleamed with triumph as she made me chamomile tea, no doubt laced with more benzodiazepines. Emma played her part perfectly, calling my parents with concerns about my behavior, suggesting that maybe they were right about my mental state. Derek, still pretending to be my confidant, reported back everything I told him about feeling overwhelmed and confused. What none of them knew was that I hadn't drunk the tea, that every conversation was being recorded, that Miranda had hired a private investigator to document their every move. The trap was set, but it wasn't the one my parents had planned. As I lay in my childhood bed in their house, pretending to be sedated while they discussed their plans in the hallway, I felt a strange sense of power. They thought they'd broken me, reduced me to a helpless child they could control. They had no idea that their perfect victim was about to become their worst nightmare. The business betrayal had been their boldest move yet, but it would also be their undoing. Every forged document, every lie to my employer, every dollar they'd stolen was meticulously documented. The hunter was about to become the hunted. The shocking revelation about the true scope of the conspiracy came during a family barbecue at my Aunt Claire's house. I had been playing my role perfectly for 2 weeks, appearing increasingly fragile and dependent on my family's support. As I sat on the patio, pretending to be drowsy from the medication my parents insisted I take, I overheard a conversation that chilled me to my core. Aunt Claire and Uncle Robert were huddled with my parents near the pool house, speaking in low voices they thought I couldn't hear. Are you sure this will work better than with David? Aunt Claire asked nervously, twisting her wedding ring. David, my older cousin who'd had a nervous breakdown 5 years ago and now lived in a supervised facility in Montana, his trust fund managed by his parents. I'd always been told he'd developed severe mental illness in his 20s. Now, a horrible suspicion crept into my mind. David was messier, my father replied coldly. He fought too hard, made too much noise. We've learned from those mistakes. Nicole is already coming apart beautifully. The therapist is documenting everything perfectly. My blood ran cold. The therapist. Dr. Morrison, whom my parents had insisted I see for my stress. Who'd been so understanding, so willing to prescribe medications I pretended to take. That night, I called Miranda from a burner phone Emma had given me. I need you to investigate my cousin David's commitment. I think my parents and aunt have done this before. Within 48 hours, Miranda's investigator had uncovered a pattern that made my situation look like child's play. David had indeed been systematically destroyed by his parents and mine working together. His breakdown had been induced through drugs, gaslighting, and forged medical documents. He'd been a successful software engineer with a promising startup when his grandmother left him $2 million. Within 6 months, he was in a psychiatric facility, his parents in control of everything. The network was bigger than just my immediate family. Dr. Morrison, I discovered, had been involved in David's case, too. He had a history of working with wealthy families to have their adult children declared incompetent, always for substantial fees, always with the same pattern of escalating medications and documented deterioration. He wasn't a real psychiatrist, but a master manipulator with enough credentials to fool desperate family members and complicit authorities. The third betrayal, when Derek's true colors were revealed, happened at my apartment. He'd convinced me to let him stay over, claiming he wanted to protect me from my parents. I pretended to be deeply medicated, slurring my words and stumbling slightly. Derek made me tea, watching carefully to ensure I drank it all. Then he made a call, thinking I was unconscious on the couch. "She's out. You can come over with the papers now." Yeah, she trusts me completely. She'll sign anything I put in front of her. 20 minutes later, my parents arrived with a stack of documents. Through barely opened eyes, I watched Derek guide my hand to sign papers I couldn't read, my supposedly unconscious signature, authorizing my parents as my medical and financial representatives. They took photos of me signing, creating evidence of my voluntary compliance. "Perfect," my mother murmured. "Dr. Morrison says with these we can have her committed by next week. The facility in Wisconsin is ready." They discussed their plans, openly confident in my unconsciousness. The facility they'd chosen specialized in long-term care for difficult patients. They'd already transferred ownership of my apartment to themselves. My car was being sold. My position at work would be formally resigned due to health reasons. They were erasing me piece by piece while I lay there pretending to be helpless. After they left, I immediately contacted Miranda and Emma. The recordings from my hidden cameras had captured everything: the drugging, the forged signatures, the conspiracy discussions. But Miranda wanted more. "We need to let them execute their plan far enough that there's no ambiguity about their intentions. Are you strong enough to let this play out a little longer?" The sixth attack came 3 days later. I was at work giving a presentation I'd insisted on completing when security and 2 men in medical uniforms entered the conference room. "Miss Stevens, we're here to help you. Your family is concerned about your welfare." My colleagues watched in horror as I was escorted out, my protests falling on deaf ears. The commitment papers Dr. Morrison had signed claimed I was a danger to myself, that I'd threatened suicide during our last session, a complete fabrication. The psychiatric facility was a nightmare wrapped in therapeutic language. The intake process was designed to break down any resistance to make patients doubt their own sanity. But I held on to the truth. This was temporary. Every moment was being documented by Miranda's team, and my parents were walking into a trap. I submitted to their evaluations, took their medications under supervision, then discreetly disposed of them, and waited. Emma, playing the concerned friend, visited daily. During one visit, she slipped me a note. FBI involved. Financial crimes unit interested. Hold on, 2 more days. 2 days felt like a lifetime when nurses watched your every move, and doctors treated your assertions of a conspiracy as symptoms of your illness. But I held on, knowing that my parents were probably already celebrating their victory, dividing up my assets, planning their next vacation with my money. On my 3rd night in the facility, something unexpected happened. A night nurse, an older woman named Grace, sat beside my bed during her rounds. "You're not crazy, are you?" she whispered. "I've seen this before. Rich families dumping their kids here when money's involved. I can't do much, but I can make sure you stay safe until help comes." She became my guardian angel, ensuring I wasn't over-medicated, keeping the more aggressive staff away from me. Miranda worked tirelessly on the outside, filing emergency petitions, presenting evidence to judges, and coordinating with law enforcement. The forged signatures were confirmed by handwriting experts. The financial trails showed clear embezzlement. The conspiracy between family members and Dr. Morrison established a pattern of racketeering. But the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source: Aunt Claire's conscience. Faced with the FBI investigation, knowing her own son David was a victim of her greed, Claire cracked. She called Miranda, sobbing, ready to confess everything, in exchange for a plea deal. She had recordings, emails, documents that proved the entire conspiracy. She revealed that my grandmother's death, while appearing natural, had come suspiciously soon after she'd announced her intention to change her will. "We didn't mean for it to go this far," she wept. "It was just supposed to be about money. Just about money." As if destroying lives for profit was somehow acceptable if you kept it simple. As I lay in that hospital bed listening to Grace hum softly while she did her rounds, I thought about David, trapped for years in a similar facility, his life stolen by the people who should have protected him. I thought about my grandmother, possibly murdered for trying to protect me. I thought about trust family and how the people who claim to love you can become your worst enemies when money enters the equation. Tomorrow the trap would spring. Tomorrow, my parents would learn that their perfect plan had one fatal flaw: they'd underestimated their perfect daughter. The counterattack began at dawn on my 5th day in the psychiatric facility. I was awakened not by the usual medication rounds, but by Grace gently shaking my shoulder. "There are some people here to see you, honey. Official people. Your lawyer said to tell you it's time." My heart raced as I pulled on the robe she offered, trying to calm the mixture of anticipation and fear coursing through my veins. In the facility's conference room, Miranda Chen sat with 2 FBI agents and a representative from the state attorney's office. The lead agent, a woman named Sarah Kim, slid a badge across the table. "Miss Stevens, we've been investigating your family for financial fraud, racketeering, and conspiracy. We need your help to finish what you started." I nodded, ready to drop the act I'd maintained for so long. For the next 3 hours, I provided detailed testimony about everything I'd experienced, supported by the mountain of evidence Miranda had compiled. The recordings from my apartment were particularly damning, especially the ones where my parents discussed their previous success with David and their plans for my future. Agent Kim's expression grew increasingly grim as she reviewed the evidence. "This is one of the most elaborate family fraud schemes we've encountered. Your documentation is impeccable. Miranda had been brilliant in her strategy. She'd used my marketing skills to create a comprehensive presentation of evidence complete with timelines, financial flows, and connection charts that would make any prosecutor salivate. We'd turned my professional expertise against the very people who tried to use it to discredit me. Your parents' seventh attack, the one they're planning for tomorrow, will be their undoing, Miranda explained. They've scheduled a competency hearing where they plan to present Dr. Morrison's falsified records and your forged consent forms. They have no idea we'll be there with federal agents. That evening, still playing my role, I called my parents from the facility's phone, knowing they'd record it as evidence of my deterioration. Mom. Dad, I'm so confused. The doctors here say I've been sick. Maybe you were right. I'm sorry for causing so much trouble. My mother's voice oozed false sympathy. Oh, sweetheart, we just want what's best for you. Tomorrow after the hearing, you'll be transferred somewhere better, where you can get real help. Just trust us. Trust. The word that had once meant safety now tasted like poison. I hung up and returned to my room where Grace was waiting with a small smile. Tomorrow, huh? I nodded. Tomorrow, everything changes. She patted my hand. Good. I've watched too many young people disappear into this system. It's time someone fought back. The competency hearing was set for 2 o'clock in the courthouse downtown. My parents arrived early, dressed in their finest clothes, projecting an image of concerned, respectable citizens. Dr. Morrison was there with his fabricated files, ready to testify about my dangerous delusions. Derek sat in the back, still playing the supportive cousin. They'd even convinced Jake to attend, prepared to describe my erratic behavior during our relationship. I was brought in through a side door, still in facility clothing, playing the part of the broken daughter one last time. My parents' eyes lit up when they saw me mistaking my appearance for victory. The judge, an elderly man who seemed sympathetic to my parents' plight, began the proceedings by expressing his concern for family unity and the importance of protecting vulnerable individuals. Then Miranda stood up. Your Honor, before we proceed, there are some people who need to be present for this hearing. The doors opened and FBI agents filed in, followed by the state prosecutor, and to everyone's shock, Aunt Claire in custody having already agreed to testify. My parents' faces went from confident to confused to terrified in seconds. Your Honor, the federal prosecutor began. We're here to arrest Harold and Ruth Stevens, Dr. Richard Morrison, and Derek Williams for conspiracy to commit fraud, racketeering, attempted murder through poisoning, and false imprisonment. The courtroom erupted. My father jumped to his feet, shouting about misunderstandings and his rights. My mother tried to run, but was quickly detained by an agent. The evidence was presented systematically. Financial records showing the embezzlement. The forged signatures confirmed by experts. The test results showing benzodiazepines in my food and coffee. Recordings of my parents discussing their plans. And then the coup de grace Claire's full confession detailing how they'd done the same thing to David. How they'd been planning this for years and suggesting that my grandmother's death might not have been natural. Dr. Morrison tried to maintain his professional composure, claiming he'd been deceived by my parents about my condition. But Miranda had his financial records showing payments totaling over $200,000 for my parents and aunt over 5 years, always timed perfectly with his diagnoses. His medical license, already suspicious, crumbled under scrutiny. He wasn't even properly certified in psychiatry, just a con artist with enough knowledge to fool desperate families. Derek's betrayal was perhaps the most painful to watch unfold. As the agents handcuffed him, he looked at me with genuine tears. Nicole, I'm sorry. They promised to help with my business debts. I never thought it would go this far. I stared back unmoved. You watched them drug me, Derek. You guided my hand to sign papers that would have locked me away forever. You chose money over family. The eighth attack, my parents had planned their final move to have me permanently committed to a high-security facility never materialized. Instead, they were the ones led away in handcuffs, their carefully constructed image of respectability shattered. The local news was already gathering outside their conspiracy, too sensational to ignore. Prominent Winnetka couple arrested in elaborate scheme to steal daughter's inheritance would be tomorrow's headline. But the revelations weren't over. The FBI's investigation, prompted by the interstate nature of the fraud, uncovered a network of similar schemes across 3 states. Dr. Morrison had been the linchpin working with wealthy families to have their adult children committed and their assets seized. My case had broken open something much larger, potentially helping dozens of victims like David. In the judge's chambers afterward, with the competency hearing obviously dismissed, I sat with Miranda and the federal agents. "We'll need your continued cooperation," Agent Kim explained. "Your documentation and testimony will be crucial in prosecuting not just your family, but the entire network." I agreed immediately. This wasn't just about my revenge anymore. It was about justice for everyone who'd been victimized by this system. The facility released me that afternoon, with Grace giving me a tight hug before I left. "You did it, honey. You actually did it." As I walked out into the sunshine, truly free for the first time in months, I thought about the trap my parents had set and how it had become their undoing. They'd been so confident in their plan, so sure that their perfect daughter would crumble under pressure. They'd never imagined that I'd inherited something more valuable than money from Grandma Rose, her strength, her cunning, and her refusal to be anyone's victim. Miranda drove me home past the news vans already gathering outside my parents' house. "You know this is just the beginning," she said. "The trials, the media attention, the family fallout, it's going to be rough." I nodded, watching the familiar streets pass by. "I know, but for the first time in my life I'm writing my own story. And this time I'm the hero, not the victim." 3 weeks after the arrests, my extended family called for an emergency meeting at the Winnetka Country Club, the same place where my parents had entertained Jake while plotting my destruction. The invitation came through my Uncle Robert Clare's husband, who'd been mysteriously absent during his wife's confession and arrest. I knew it was a trap of a different kind, an attempt to manipulate me through family pressure and guilt. Miranda advised against attending, but I had my own plans. This confrontation had been building for months, and I wouldn't let them control the narrative. I arrived with my own entourage, Miranda agent Kim Emma, and a forensic accountant Miranda had hired to trace the full extent of the family's financial crimes. The private dining room was packed with relatives I hadn't seen in years, all wearing expressions of shock, confusion, and barely concealed calculation. Uncle Robert stood as I entered, his political smile firmly in place. "Nicole, thank you for coming. We need to discuss the situation as a family." I took my seat at the head of the table, a power move that didn't go unnoticed. "There's nothing to discuss, Robert. Your wife is cooperating with federal authorities. My parents are facing 25 years in prison. Derek's looking at 10 to 15. What exactly do you think this meeting will accomplish?" The room erupted in voices, accusations flying. How could I destroy the family? Didn't I understand that this was a private matter? Surely there had been misunderstandings that could be resolved without involving outsiders. My cousin Sandra, whom I'd once been close to, leaned forward with tears in her eyes. "Nicole, your parents made mistakes, but they love you. Can't you find it in your heart to forgive them? Think about what Grandma Rose would have wanted." The invocation of my grandmother's name ignited something fierce within me. What Grandma Rose wanted, I said, my voice cutting through the chatter, was to leave me her estate directly. She knew exactly what my parents were capable of, which is why she tried to change her will before she mysteriously died. The room fell silent. Miranda stood, opening her briefcase with theatrical precision. Since we're discussing family matters, let's discuss all of them. Agent Kim, would you like to share what the investigation has uncovered? Sarah Kim's presentation was devastating. Using the conference room's screen, she displayed a web of financial transactions spanning 15 years. My family hadn't just targeted David and me. There were elderly relatives who died under suspicious circumstances, their estates mysteriously depleted. Business partners who'd been forced out through manufactured scandals. A pattern of greed and betrayal that infected the entire family tree. "This is ridiculous!" Uncle Robert blustered, his face reddening. "You can't prove any of these wild accusations." That's when Emma played the recording she'd been holding in reserve, one I didn't even know she had. It was from a dinner at my parents' house 6 months ago, captured by my phone left recording in my purse. The conversation was between my parents Robert and 2 other uncles discussing how to handle the Nicole situation and mentioning their success with previous problems. The forensic accountant took over, showing how money had been systematically siphoned from family trusts, elderly relatives' accounts, and even charitable foundations the family managed. The scale was staggering, over $30 million over 2 decades, hidden through shell companies and offshore accounts. My inheritance was just their latest target, but their greed had finally made them sloppy. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. The doors opened again and David walked in. My cousin, supposedly permanently incapacitated in Montana, stood tall and clear-eyed. The room gasped collectively. "Hello, family," he said, his voice steady. "I've been in protective custody for the past month, ever since Nicole's case gave me the courage to reach out for help. I've spent 5 years pretending to be insane to survive, documenting everything I could. I have names, dates, and recordings you haven't even imagined." Aunt Margaret fainted. 2 uncles tried to leave but found federal agents waiting in the hallway. Uncle Robert's political smile finally cracked. "You can't do this. We're family. We're blood." I stood, feeling the weight of generations of betrayal and greed. Blood means nothing when it's poisoned by greed. You taught me that. Family isn't about DNA. It's about trust, love, and protection. You failed on all counts. The 8th attack came from an unexpected source. My mother's sister, Joyce, whom I'd always thought was uninvolved, suddenly produced documents claiming I owed the family estate millions in loans my parents had taken on my behalf. She'd been their insurance policy, holding forged documents to use if everything else failed. But Miranda was ready. Those documents were notarized by the same person who notarized the fake power of attorney. He's already confessed to the FBI. Would you like to add forgery charges to your conspiracy involvement? As the FBI agents began reading rights and making additional arrests, I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and sorrow. This wasn't how family was supposed to work. These people had shared holidays with me, celebrated my achievements, pretended to love me while calculating my worth in dollars. But their final attack had failed, just like all the others. They'd underestimated the power of truth and the strength of a woman pushed too far. Uncle Robert made one last desperate play. "Nicole, if you proceed with this, you'll destroy the family name. Your children will carry this shame. Is that what you want?" I looked him straight in the eye. "The only shame is what you've done. I'm not destroying the family name. I'm cleansing it. And unlike you, if I have children, I'll teach them that love isn't conditional on bank balances." David stood beside me as our relatives were led away, some in handcuffs, others with summons to appear before grand juries. "Thank you," he whispered. "You saved more than just yourself. You saved all of us who were trapped in their web." We watched as the dynasty built on deception crumbled in a single afternoon. The country club members pressed against windows, watching the mighty Stevens family fall. Later in the parking lot, my parents were brought out in transport vehicles. My mother saw me and called out her perfectly styled hair, now disheveled, her designer suit wrinkled from the holding cell. "Nicole, please. We're your parents. We gave you everything." I walked over to the vehicle, needing to say one last thing. "You gave me life, but you tried to take it back when it became profitable." The parents I thought I had never existed. They were just another con, another performance. But you taught me well. I learned to see through lies, to document everything, and to strike when the enemy thinks they've won. For that education, I suppose I should thank you. My father, silent until now, spoke through the van's grated window. "You'll regret this. When you're alone, when you realize you've destroyed your entire family, you'll regret this." I smiled, the first genuine smile I'd felt in months. I'm not alone. I have Emma, who showed me what real loyalty looks like. I have Grace, who protected me when I was vulnerable. I have David, who survived hell and came back to fight. I have Miranda, who believed in justice over blood. That's my real family. You're just the people who share my DNA. As the vehicles pulled away, taking my biological family to face justice, I stood in that country club parking lot, feeling lighter than air. The final confrontation hadn't gone as they'd planned. There would be no guilt-driven forgiveness, no family pressure to drop charges, no last-minute reconciliation. There was only truth consequences and the strange freedom that comes from cutting toxic ties even when those ties are labeled family. 6 months later, I stood in a federal courthouse in Chicago watching as the judge delivered the sentences. My parents each received 22 years for racketeering, fraud, conspiracy, and attempted poisoning. Derek got 12 years, his cooperation earning him a slightly reduced sentence. Dr. Morrison, exposed as the mastermind of a multi-state scheme, received 30 years and would never practice any form of medicine again. The other family members received various sentences ranging from 5 to 15 years, their empire of greed finally toppling. The legal victories came with financial restitution as well. Not only did I recover my stolen inheritance and savings, but the civil suits Miranda filed resulted in significant damages. The total settlement exceeded $8 million money that came from the frozen assets of family members who'd participated in the schemes. It felt like justice, but it also felt hollow. No amount of money could buy back the innocence I'd lost, or the family I'd never really had. David and I used a portion of our settlements to establish the Rose Foundation, named after our grandmother. The foundation helps victims of family financial abuse, providing legal resources, safe housing, and counseling for those trying to escape similar situations. In our first year, we helped 43 people reclaim their lives from predatory relatives. Each success story helped heal the wounds our own family had inflicted. The healing process wasn't linear. There were nights I woke up panicking, checking my food for drugs that weren't there. Therapy with Dr. Sarah Winters, a legitimate psychologist specializing in family trauma, helped me process the betrayal and rebuild my ability to trust. "What your family did was use your love against you," she explained during one session. "They weaponized the very bonds that should have protected you." Healing means learning to form new bonds without that fear. Emma remained my rock throughout the recovery. She'd taken leave from her job during the trial to support me, and our friendship had evolved into something deeper than family. "You know what the best revenge really is," she asked one evening as we shared wine in my new apartment, one I'd bought with my own money in my own name. It's not the prison sentences or the money. It's that you're thriving. You're living proof that their attempt to destroy you failed completely. Work became a sanctuary. Stan had welcomed me back with open arms after the truth came out, even offering me a promotion to head our new ethics and marketing division. I threw myself into projects that mattered using my story to help companies understand the importance of supporting employees facing personal crises. The girl who'd almost been erased had become a voice for those who couldn't speak. Romance wasn't on my radar, trust being a commodity I hoarded carefully. But slowly through the Foundation's work, I met others who understood betrayal and recovery. James, a fellow survivor whose siblings had stolen his tech startup, became first a friend, then something more. He understood the paranoia, the need to verify everything twice the way I still tested my coffee before drinking. "We're not broken," he told me one day. "We're just careful. There's strength in that." A year after the trial, I received a letter from my mother in prison. Against Miranda's advice, I read it. It was full of justifications, blame shifting, and demands for forgiveness. She claimed I'd destroyed the family, that I'd chosen money over blood, that I would regret this when I was old and alone. I stared at her words, waiting to feel something, anything. But there was only emptiness where family love should have been. I visited them once, needing closure. The federal prison was sterile and gray, matching my parents' new reality. They sat across from me in orange jumpsuits, looking older, smaller, their power stripped away. "Why?" I asked simply. "Why wasn't being my parents enough? Why did you need to own me?" My father's jaw worked silently before he answered. "You were always going to leave us. Get married, have your own family. The money was insurance that you'd always need us." The twisted logic of it, love reduced to a transaction, finally helped me understand. They'd never seen me as a daughter, just an investment that needed to pay dividends. My mother reached for my hand across the table, but I pulled back. "I loved you, Nicole. In my way, I loved you." I stood to leave, needing to say one final thing. "Maybe you did, but you loved money more. And that's why you're here and I'm free." I walked out without looking back, leaving them to their consequences and their corrupted version of love. The Foundation grew, expanding to 3 cities, helping hundreds of victims. David and I became the family we'd needed, supporting each other through setbacks and celebrating victories. Grace from the psychiatric facility joined our board, bringing invaluable insight about institutional abuse. Even Stan donated, saying my story had opened his eyes to the hidden struggles his employees might face. Today, as I write this from my office at the Rose Foundation, I'm surrounded by photos not of the family I was born into, but the family I chose. Emma, David, Grace, Miranda, who became a close friend, James, and dozens of survivors who've become part of our community. We share no blood, but we share something stronger. The knowledge that we survived, that we're worthy of real love, and that family isn't about DNA or bank accounts. The best revenge truly isn't destroying those who hurt you. It's building a life so beautiful, so full of genuine connection and purpose that their absence becomes a blessing rather than a loss. My parents sit in prison counting days and dollars they'll never see. I sit in freedom, counting the lives we've helped save, and the real family we've built from the ashes of betrayal. To those watching who might be trapped in their own family nightmares, know this: you don't owe loyalty to those who see you as a resource. Love doesn't demand you sacrifice your safety, sanity, or savings. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to walk away from those who share your blood, but would gladly spill it for profit. The trap they set for you can become their own downfall. but only if you're brave enough to fight back with truth documentation and the support of chosen family who actually understand what love means. What's your story? Have you ever had to choose between family and freedom, between blood and truth? Share your experiences in the comments below, because every story shared helps someone else realize they're not alone. If this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe to hear more about survival recovery and the power of choosing your own family. And remember, sharing this video might help someone recognize the signs of family financial abuse before it's too late. Together, we can break the silence that allows these predators to thrive, even when they share our last names. Thank you for listening to my story, and may you find the strength to write your own ending, no matter who tries to hold the pen.